Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me introduce Forrest today. Forrest Perry has worked for the YMCA for just over 25 years and is currently serving as our Regional Vice President for YMCA The Triangle. Before moving into the RVP role, Forrest was a branch director for the Durham YMCAs, and years ago he actually worked part-time for me at the Chapel Hill Y, and now he's my boss. So he is providing leadership to and oversight of YMCAs in Orange, Durham, and Chatham counties. And as a fellow Rotarian, Forrest and his wife, Becca, live with their two children, Turner and Merritt, in Durham. And I'd like to now turn it over to Forrest, and thanks, Forrest, for being here.
Absolutely. And thank you, Kim. Thank you, Mr. President and club members. It's nice to be with you today. It's so fun to come together with Chapel Hill folks. I am a alumnus of UNC, even though my wife and I live in Durham now, but a very proud Tar Heel, and had the opportunity maybe just weeks before the world kind of came to a halt with COVID to actually join Kim as a guest at one of your meetings. So it's truly a pleasure to be back with you today, and excited to spend a little bit of time with you. I want to give you a little bit of context before I kind of walk through my presentation today. And Nick Vaughn invited me to speak, I think it was back in the spring, and that again was right before COVID started happening. And at that time we had a very kind of laser focus on a topic that we wanted to talk about. Obviously things shifted significantly at that point. Club meetings went virtual. The Y closed its door for a brief period of time. And over the course of the summer, the context and concept of our discussion today has evolved significantly. So I want to give you a little bit of an update of where the Y is and what we're doing today, what we have been doing over the past 6 months. And really, as we head into this school year, some of the work that we are laser focused on at this point. And then I'll try to keep my comments brief. Again, as a fellow Rotarian, I know how it is when guests talk for too long, so I'll try to keep my comments brief, but happy to answer questions at the end as possible. I did want to give you a little bit of context, though. The Y as an organization was founded in 1844. It was founded in London, England, and then moved over to the U.S. very shortly thereafter. The Y in Chapel Hill was actually founded in 1860. The YMCA was founded on UNC's campus in 1860. The YWCA was founded on UNC's campus in 1935. As you might imagine, with the YMCA being founded prior to the Civil War times kind of brought that to a halt, and YMCA kind of shifted and evolved in different ways. In later years, the YMCA and the YWCA merged in 1963 to form what is now known as the Campus Y. And for a number of years, the Campus Y was an official kind of YMCA of the USA organization. But around 1968 or so, severed ties and became kind of an independent autonomous organization on UNC's campus. That then led to the creation of what you have now as the Chapel Hill Carrboro YMCAs, founded originally in 1968, and then moved into our current building in 1974. So a little bit of history of where the Y's been over the past century and plus. But wanted to give you some of that context. If I could, I'd like to share my screen, and I'm going to try that now. And I just want to walk you through a little bit of information regarding the work that we've been doing over the past 6 months. Again, as you know, all of our lives were significantly interrupted in early March. And the Y, I remember I was in a meeting on March 3rd or 4th when the first case in North Carolina was identified in Wake County. And within a matter of weeks, we ultimately had to close our doors by state mandate. But we didn't stay closed for long. And we have, the popular word of the past 6 months has been pivoted. We pivoted in many different directions and are very proud of the work that we've done today. Before I go through this, I just want to give just a tremendous amount of kudos to Kim Grooms as our executive director for the Chapel Hill Carrboro YMCAs. Kim has done a tremendous job leading her team and her volunteers and the community through the work that the Y has been doing. And we would not be where we are today as an organization without Kim's leadership. And so, Kim, I'm very grateful to you and everything you and your team have done. If you don't get a chance to look behind the scenes of the work of the Y, it is a tremendous amount of work, and Kim has really carried the burden of that for her team in Chapel Hill. And so, Kim, very grateful to you and everything you've done.
Thank you.
But I want to take just a couple of moments to walk through some of the things that we've done to support our communities, including right here in Chapel Hill through the pandemic that we currently find ourselves in. Again, back in March, we immediately closed our doors under state regulation. But the first thing that we were able to kind of re-engage in was a program that we call Camp Hope. And Camp Hope was a child care program for healthcare and essential workers in the Triangle area. We ran a location at our Chapel Hill Carborough YMCA. And between that location and 5 other locations in the Triangle, we served approximately 276 children from March until May. And again, our focus at that point, based on state regulations, was really on serving the children of essential workers here in our communities. I also might mention that part of the programming and part of the decisions around the programming that we've done over the past 6 months has been really clearly mandated by the state of North Carolina, the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as this CDC. So anything that we do has been under the coordination and direction of those entities to ensure that we're able to do so in the safest fashion possible. So Camp Hope was an incredibly important program. My wife is a nurse. She works at UNC hospitals, and I know how important that is for essential workers, not just for my family, but for many others. And we're proud to be able to provide that program. Across the country, YMCA's provided similar programs to children of essential workers to approximately 42,000 children since the beginning of the pandemic, with tremendous success in doing so. Another program that we began to focus on in these early months was called Delivering Good, and that was our YMCA mobile services. It was an effort for us to help mobilize YMCA staff and buses, which we have a fleet of buses that at that time were sitting idle, to help partner in delivering food and critical items to underserved communities. Now, we'll say in Chapel Hill, we didn't go in depth in this because this community already has such a robust and wonderful food program. So instead, Kim and her team found other ways to align with community efforts in support of the great work that was already happening here in Chapel Hill. But collectively throughout the Triangle, we helped provide 59,000 meals and helping to support over 5,000 families. Fortunately for many of us, Kim has a background in summer camp. She got her early days in summer camp programming, as did I. And so we were very grateful this summer to be able to transition into a summer camp program. Now, with that being said, it was a summer like no other. Significant restrictions, significant reduction, both in the number of sites and our capacity at each of those sites. But we're very proud of the work that we did. And this summer, the YMCA of the Triangle ran 36 different camps across the Triangle area. In Chapel Hill, we specifically ran 2 locations, one at our main facility on MLK, and then another at Camp Clearwater. And I'm proud to say that due to the incredible work that Kim and her staff did, we did it safely and successfully. And we're so thankful to be able to provide that opportunity to the children in our community. As we continue through all of this, and one of the things that Chapel Hill has historically done is supported the work of our community with blood drives. So in April and May, we partnered with the American Red Cross, and Kim and her team continue to partner with the Blood Connection and others to bring this critical service to our community as well. And so we've done all of those things since March to help support our community. It's interesting, I referenced earlier the pre-Civil War origination of the YMCA on UNC's campus. The Y, as the Civil War began, shifted in many different ways. And if you look through old historical Y books, you'll see pictures of coffee carts that the Y took out onto the battlefields to provide coffee to the soldiers on both sides of the line. Remember, we had YMCAs in the north and YMCAs in the south at that point. But working to support the communities. And so the Y has a history of shifting to meet community need And the current moment that we find ourselves in is certainly just like unlike the previous, but we're also comfortable in shifting and redirecting our resources in a way to meet the greatest needs of our community. Now, one of the things that Nick really wanted me to talk about today, and again, has changed significantly even over the past month, is the work that we are doing as an organization to focus on addressing the achievement gap. For those of you that may not be familiar with that language, achievement gap really refers to the academic performance gap between students within a different district. Another way, and maybe a more appropriate way to think of it, is the opportunity gap, because it's not based on students being smarter or less smart than one another, but it's really based on factors that are outside of their control, opportunities that are outside of their control that ultimately lead to academic performance. When you think about that, qualifiers that often influence that significantly are race, ethnicity, the zip code a child lives in, and the socioeconomic status that they have. And so the Y has been actively involved in this work of reducing the opportunity gap and reducing the achievement gap in our communities for many, many years now. I want to share a couple of statistics with you to talk about why this is a really important piece of what we do. And so Chapel Hill, by any record, has one of the top academic performing schools in the state, if not the country, and it is widely revered as a destination for families because of that school district. However, when you disaggregate the data and look at the performance of white students and African American students, Chapel Hill is the second to last in the United States in regards to the achievement gap between white and African American students. It's the fifth largest gap between white and Latinx, or Hispanic and Latino students. So although the school district in and of itself in our community has so many resources, those resources don't come to bear for every single student. When you look at the district in particular, the Chapel Hill Carrboro City School District has approximately 12,000 students in it. Approximately 20 to 25% of those are on free and reduced lunch. If you want to begin to think about an opportunity gap or an achievement gap within a given community, beginning to look at free and reduced populations is a good place to start. So out of the 12,000 students in the Chapel Hill Carrboro district, roughly 3,000 of them are on free and reduced lunch. And while it's not applicable to assume that all of them are faced with an opportunity gap, it is fair to say that a large majority of them have been addressed with that. You know, why is the opportunity gap and achievement gap important? When you think about starting young, this gap is present even at a very young age. Scientists, sociologists can infer from children as early as 3 and 4 years old that this opportunity gap and this achievement gap is already being able to be demonstrated in their young development. If you follow that later, only approximately a third of Americans have college or post-secondary degrees. So if you follow that achievement gap and that opportunity gap, it impacts the graduation rate from college. And then when you think about that, the third that have those college or post-secondary degrees tend to do very well, but the bottom 2/3 control less than 15% of the nation's wealth. So this gap and this opportunity gap that begins at a very early age expands and continues to grow over time, leading to lifelong implications for those students. So the Y, like many other community organizations, understands just how important this is and just how important our work in this program is as well. Prior to COVID, we were very proud to run a program here in our area called the Y Learning Program. And in Chapel Hill, Carrboro City Schools, as well as Orange County Schools, we served approximately 150 students in that program at several different sites throughout the county. Obviously, students aren't in person right now, and so that we're not able to do that program at this point. However, we have shifted yet again to support our students in this new academic environment we find ourselves in today, which is where we land at our scholastic support centers. Now this slide is a little dated. The original conversations partnering with Wake County, but to date, we have secured partnerships with Orange County Schools, Chapel Hill, Carrboro City Schools, Chatham County Schools, Durham Public Schools, Wake, Lee, and Johnston County Schools. We opened those programs earlier this week with about 20 locations across the Triangle, serving approximately 1,000 students and supporting them with a safe, supportive place to access their online learning. We know while some families in our community have the flexibility to be able to stay at home with their children during this virtual school year, not everybody does, especially those of our families who are essential workers, and especially students already faced with this achievement and opportunity gap. Here in Chapel Hill, Kim and her team have already mobilized to provide the program at our main branch, and we're excited to announce formal partnerships with the Chapel Hill Carrboro City School District, as well as Orange County Schools, that have begun already in Orange County, and Chapel Hill will launch this coming Monday. We're excited to be able to partner with both the Chapel Hill Carrboro City School District as well as the town of Chapel Hill to be able to provide this program for free to 100 students starting this Monday at 2 different community centers, and have received financial support to be able to do so for the duration of this calendar year, which we know Chapel Hill's already chosen to go virtual for this calendar year. So we know we had a problem prior to COVID, and the Y was working aggressively to address that, but certainly COVID has exacerbated that. What studies show is that students during the school year, that's not so much when the gap widens between white students and minority students. The gap widens when school is not in session. Typically that's called the summer learning loss or the summer slide. Well, most students, many students have really been in about a 6-month slide at this point. And that slide disproportionately affects minority students as opposed to their white counterparts in their school districts. So we're here to help again with the Scholastic Support Centers, and we're excited to do this program and to continue doing this program as we move forward. I did want to share one last thing, and that is just a brief video highlighting some of the work that we've been doing and talking about the importance of our community standing with us as we continue to move into this next chapter of what this living in the midst of COVID looks like for all of us. Featured in this video is Doug McMillan, our CEO, and some other folks from around the YMCA of the Triangle.
Getting.
Forrest, there's no sound. Are you aware?
I am now. Okay. Thank you for that. I was afraid that might be the case. And sometimes Zoom will make it easy to share sound and sometimes it will not. But I tell you what, I want to be mindful of everybody's time. And I've learned over my past that troubleshooting technology in the middle of the meeting is not the right thing to do. What I think we'll do is I'll include a link to this video to send out in your bulletin along with the presenter notes so that you'll all be able to take a look at it at your leisure. And with that, Mr. President, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to any questions that the group may have.
Thank you, Forrest. I appreciate your all that you're doing for such an important group, and we appreciate you joining us today. I know that I feel certain that our club has questions. I see that Jim Hevner has raised his hand. Why don't we start with Jim? Jim, do you have a question?
Well, I'm sorry. I seem to always have my journalistic stuff will not die, and I always have more questions than there are answers. Of course, the statistic is alarming. I could almost hear everyone gasping when you talked about the gap between white and black students in our city schools. And as we ponder it, it perhaps is not terribly surprising if we think about the very high achievement, academic achievement of our population as a whole, and the fact that so much of our black family population may not participate in that. And so I'm not sure the question is relevant, but it might be useful to know, do you know whether it is a function of the extraordinarily high achievement of our white students and that Black students, while they may be left behind, do you know how our Black students compare with peer districts in North Carolina in terms of their academic achievement?
That's a great question. And so I hear a couple of different questions in there. So the disparity between Black students and white students in this particular district certainly has some corollary factors to the high performance. But one of the reasons that within our circles, for folks that kind of work in this space, the language over the past several years has really shifted from achievement gap to opportunity gap. Because when we think of it as an achievement gap, it speaks more to the intellectual capabilities of an individual. And what we know is that though there is no disparity there amongst race or ethnicity, children are born with comparable abilities as they begin to learn. What happens is that they're presented with different opportunities.
Yes,
and those different opportunities along the way lead to widening that gap. Robert Putnam, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
That part of it is clear, yeah. And my question didn't suggest otherwise. My question really is simply trying to have better context for the gap.
Certainly, and one of the other things I'll include for your bulletin, if you'd like, that statistic comes from the Stanford Center for Education Policy in a study that was released last year that actually drew quite a bit of conversation within the Chapel Hill community. Within the particular study, there are links to deaggregate that data within districts within our state. So we'll include that as well, and that can give you some comparison on that. To help you kind of understand how that relates from one district in the state to the next.
Good.
I know that I think Peggy had a good question. Peggy, are you on the call still?
Gavin.
There, hi. Yes, I was wondering about the scholastic program that you provide. Do you pick up the kids and bring them to the center? Do you have tutors on site, or you're just providing the Chromebooks, the laptops, the accessibility to Wi-Fi and so forth?
Certainly. So it looks, as you might imagine, it looks a little bit different in every district. But I am just so proud of the work that Kim and her team have done with the staff at the Chapel Hill Carrboro City School District and the town of Chapel Hill. I would say out of the programs we're running across the triangle right now, that is probably the most comprehensive partnership that we have with a given school district. The town is providing us the facilities, so the community center and the Hargrave Center. The school district is providing transportation for students that need it, as well as meals for those students throughout the day. And they're helping with the funding to make sure that we're able to deliver that program in a sustainable way. So we know that, again, when you think about opportunities, transportation is an opportunity gap for some of our families. So we're really excited to be able to provide that and know that that'll be a key element in the success of this program locally.
So what do you do? If you're saying the school is providing the buses and the sites and the funding, what is the YMCA doing?
So we're running it. So we are delivering the program. So as you may know, one of the things, certainly, and it's a controversial decision wherever you are, but school districts chose not to go back in person, this semester. However, we have been running in-person programming with youth since March. So this is a space that we feel very comfortable with and that we feel very capable of being able to do in a safe way. So while the school system, for lots of wonderful reasons, there's so many complex factors and the volume of students they have to deal with, while the school system did not feel comfortable bringing students back into their care, we do feel comfortable. So the school district is supporting a lot, but we're providing the direct oversight and implementation of the program.
Okay. So you're teaching them, tutoring them?
So
I'm still not understanding.
Yeah. So think of this: if you're a student and you show up for the program, it's not, one of the things we have to be very careful with is it is not school. Because what you have is a room of kindergartners and first graders, right? That may be coming from different schools, who may have different teachers. And as we've watched our programs this week, they're all on slightly different schedules. So our staff are really there to help support. They're help to make sure that the students are online. They are not full-on teachers. And so we're not able to teach all of those 100 children in place of a real teacher. but we do have instructional assistants available. We do have counselors that are providing support. Again, wonderful partnership with the staff to make sure that students that need extra level support are connecting to those staff virtually. And they also have the ability to bring those staff on site for students that really, really need it. So part of that is, and then there's a second part to the day as well, right? So there's the first part, which is mostly academic, and then there's a recreational and activity component as well. And we're coming in and supporting that part of the day also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What other questions do we have? Does anybody else have a question?
Yes, Gavin, I have a question.
Please.
I don't know how to raise my hand on this device, so I'll learn that. This is Kathy Thomas, and I lived for 26 years across the street from East Chapel High, so my kids walked there. And prior to going to high school there, they were in private school. So this is anecdotal to the opportunity gap. I was impressed when I went to a parent meeting that by being Afro-American, my children were being lumped into the at-risk population. So there was a whole lot of stereotypes, and this is high school level, that I encountered. And so, for instance, there was a meeting and there were just a dozen parents, but they were minority parents. And there were 4 Blacks, 1 white lady whose daughter was from the country of Colombia adopted, and another were 2 Hispanic parents. And this is when Dave was the principal and a Black woman was the vice principal. And to be provocative, I said, I thought this was a minority meeting, but I don't see any Asians here. And at the time, the breakdown of the population was 13% of the students were Black, 14% maybe, and 13% were Asian. And the vice principal, the Black female, retorted quickly, oh, but they do well. And so I then didn't say anything more in this public meeting. I made an appointment with Dave Thaden and met with him later. And I said, Dave, I didn't know that it was synonymous to be at risk to be Afro-American, nor did I know that it was synonymous to do well if you were Asian. I said, so imagine if this Black female principal carries this bias, what happens to everything else? So we met with the guidance counselor. I was just doing all the things you normally do. We were entering the public school system for the first time, and she recommended a curriculum for my 9th grade daughter to take. Fortunately, this Black female principal said, so what school do you think you would like to go to, Sydney? And that's the first time that was asked. And it was like, well, presume it's on the scale of her parents, who was UNC, Wake Forest, Duke, UVA, etc. She says, oh, then those courses that you're signed up for are not going to get you into those schools. You need to be in calculus this, advanced this. So what I'm getting at, this is high school, is that it starts so much sooner. Expectations go a long way. And so these opportunity gaps are not just borne out because of lack of access and so forth. And I'm an anthropology major undergrad. And I believe there's a cultural bias for that people are well-intended. But if you really want to also help is changing expectations, which is everyone. I'm glad you're not saying academic or achievement gap and opportunity gap, but so much of it is ingrained. And so again, I don't know where to start, but that's been one of my desires, is to try to get at a parent who is not educated themselves and figure out how you get that parent to weigh in on their child, their 3- and 4-year-old's education. So things like Black parents don't read to their children. So getting books in the hands of parents with the understanding of why, I'm not throwing out a plethora of things that have to be done, but what you're doing on your end is very, very helpful. But changing the mindset of our educators and our administrators is more imperative than that work. If they don't believe that these kids are not at risk by birth, then I don't know how you impact all this other stuff.
Absolutely. And that's a wonderful point. And I really appreciate you sharing that. As many folks have referenced, we're in the middle of 2 pandemics right now. And our Y has not just engaged in the work during COVID, But we've also been called by the community to step into the racial equity conversations that are happening today. And we recognize that a lot of that is a predeterminant to these opportunity and achievement gaps that you reference. Over the past several months, we've engaged in community conversations, many on Zoom, both here locally and around the country, on the racial equity and racial inequity in our society and the wise role in stepping in and addressing that. To highlight your point, the programs that we're launching on Monday with the school district, we had them the registration forms, we had them translated into 7 different languages. So you're right, it's not just about one race. It's about systemic issues at play within our community. In many communities, your zip code is just as big of a determinant of your outcome as your race.
Yes.
So which zip code you live in is such a significant factor. So you're absolutely right. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that is part of the work that we're excited about as we head into this next year. As we look beyond what COVID holds for us today, one of the things we're really excited about is establishing an Equity and Inclusion Innovation Center through the YMCA of the Triangle. And we're still trying to figure out what that looks like and what our role in that is. But we know that while our programs like our Scholastic Support Center and previous Y Learning programs address a symptom, we also have more work to do to address the root cause. And we're committed to doing both in tandem.
Excellent. I may reach out to you. I just am trying to get my feet wet on this Rotary thing, and then.
I would love to chat further.
Okay.
Very good commentary. I see that Brian Keeloff has a question.
Well, actually, that follows on Kathy's points there. Very good, Kathy. So Forrest, we're now going to put you in charge of addressing these problems that Kathy raises. And I think you've made a great start in some of the things you're doing. But as a now, you're going to rise to great prominence, Forrest. So what are you going to do? You've heard the problems. So what are the answers? I mean, and Kathy did admit she didn't know what they were. So yeah. give us some ideas.
So Brian, it's a great question. I was on a little earlier. I was hopeful you would give me an anecdotal list about marriage instead of a tough question like that, but it's only fair and appropriate. With all due respect, I think the first thing that we as an organization and our leaders are trying to do is listen. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make, especially, as a white male, I can make is to step into this space and assume that I have the answers. I think that listening is the first thing that we can do to move towards answers. I think a collective engagement with the community is important. I think involving stakeholders in that planning process and that decision-making process is ultimately what's going to be most impactful. I think involving the community and what they hope to see and they aspire for. One of the things that we really try to be mindful and attentive to as an organization is that we're not here to do programs for people. We're here to do programs with people. And we're here to make change with people in mind from a human-centered design perspective. So that may sound like a little bit of an evasive answer, but it truly is my answer. The first thing we would do is listen. And then work with the community and other stakeholders, because as we all know, this is huge. This is generational, and it's going to take a long time for us to pull out of this. But I think acknowledging that we have a problem to begin with is an important piece. The YMCA as a mission-driven organization, our mission is to put Christian principles into practice through programs that build healthy spirit, mind, and body for all. To be for all is a really important piece of what we're doing today. And how we do that and how we work with the community in doing that is really important. So the first thing we would do is listen and acknowledge that there's a problem to begin with.
So we live in liberal Chapel Hill. Forrest, when you step out 50 miles, what's the attitude?
So that's one of the interesting things of working for the YMCA of the Triangle. And I have the pleasure of working in Durham. Our corporate office is in Raleigh. I support Chapel Hill and Chatham County. We reach to Lee, Johnston County, and even all the way out to Pamlico County. The attitude of the community is very split. and divided. And I think we see that today. We see that happening in our midst this week with actions and activities that are taking place across the country. We understand that as a country, we are deeply divided right now on many different levels and many different reasons. So this work can mobilize and move in Chapel Hill in a way, because as you're right, a liberal and progressive community, but it can be more difficult in certain other communities based on the beliefs held by the residents there. So I would say one of the things I love about North Carolina, I grew up in North Carolina, I was born here, is the rich diversity of our state. I think the rich diversity in opinion is what makes this a very difficult problem to solve.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Forrest, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you for all that you are doing this is such an important group. I want to thank Kim as well for the work that she's doing. You guys are just doing great things, and we're grateful for what you're doing in the community and beyond. So, folks, I wish everyone a safe and enjoyable weekend. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and we will look forward to doing the same in the future. And in fact, next Friday,